Yeah, yeah. So I want to just echo what Paul mentioned, what Roger mentioned. Look, you guys did just amazing work with this. You know, our fearless leader, you know, was leading the way, and us doing small parts here and there to pitch in. We exceeded our goal by a couple $100 or whatever. I don't know the exact total. Somebody's got the exact total somewhere, but so we exceeded the goal. Had great representation there within even the last week. Renee got some shirts put together for us. You know, just overall, we got things set up yesterday morning and torn down this morning, and just a lot of good things. We have a lot of water, Daisy, thank you. But we really represented ourselves well, and I think you all have a lot to be proud about. And may God be glorified. Next year we will train better for the tug of war, and we did well for novices, for rookies, right? We did well, but we gotta show the mighty hand of God on the tug of war next year. So we totally. That's right. Yes. So if you have any big friends or steroid using friends, we are open to Bible studies with them. And big women too. You gotta have your 4 females, and so if you know a woman that likes Taco Tuesdays, let's talk about some Jesus with him. All right, but I am a realist amongst other things, and I know that many of you are exhausted. So first thing I want to remind you is that yesterday was our service Sunday, so we will not be having an assembly tonight, as is typical in connection to our service Sunday. So there's your time to rest. But in return for that, I need your focus for just a few minutes. Let's get this lesson, because I really want us to understand that faith fixes fear, and that the book of Daniel gives us 4 incredible stories that teach just that exact concept, that faith indeed fixes fear. And remember, again, I want this just drilled in your head. You're like, I don't know these lessons, I get so lost. Here's the bad. We started off the first couple months of this year talking about lessons from the book of Mark that showed that Jesus is bigger, better, more powerful, more smarter, better at handling your life than you are. And then last month we talked about the fact that we need to surrender all to Him because He can handle it better than you. And now we're talking about this next level, which is just replacing this fear with something, right? We got to replace our fear with something, and what we're replacing it with is faith. Because faith is the gap filler for that, and the more faith we have, the less fear we have room for, which is why the thought pot is back. The thought pot is back. And so you need to remember, okay, I gave you an assignment last week, which is to count your thoughts and quantify your thoughts and qualify your thoughts, and just, how many of my thoughts are fearful and how many of my thoughts are faithful. And I hope you did that. I hope you at least tried to sort of keep score and just get a gauge, a measure of where you're at right now with your thoughts. Because, whatever our fear is filling up, then that leaves little room for our faith. And vice versa. So many of us, I understand, the reality is many of us are fear-based. Many of us are always worried, what could go wrong? And if I do what God wants, what are the consequences? It's, if I really follow God, I'm going to end up broke and lonely. And that's what we fear, those things. And yet when we become much more faithful, our faith dominates the picture, and our fear just doesn't have a lot of room to operate in our thought pot. And so we just want to make sure that we're moving in that direction, where more and more of our thoughts are focused around the greatness of our God and what He can do if we just trust Him. That my fears get fixed, not because I try to fix my fears, but because I fix faith, and the faith fixes the fear. The more faith I have, the less fear I have room for in my thought pot. Everybody, please open your Bibles to the book of Daniel. Book of Daniel, chapter 2. So if you remember last week, we talked about Daniel's challenge. Daniel's challenge was that as a good Jewish boy, he is now a slave in Babylon, but because of his intellect and his, he was probably, handsome and clever and all those things, he was being trained to be one of the king's servants, right? Remember that? 3 years in training. And he gets faced with this challenge right off the bat because they are offering those kids the king's food, of which did not coincide with what Jewish kids could eat. And so he chose, right? He chose not to eat that food. To bring back to your recollection, I want to remind you, the Bible tells us that he resolved within himself not to be defiled. And so my challenge to you last week was to do that. To live a life of resolve, to allow your faith to set you on a course where you say, I'm not bending. I know you want me to sin. I know you want me to go against my God, but I'm not going to. I have too much faith to give into the fear of that. So that would be plenty challenge for a young man, but that's only the first. The second shows itself here in chapter 2, when the king had a dream. He had a dream that terrified him. He had a dream that worried him, that was bothering him, was on his mind. And so what the king did is he brought all of his smart people around. He brought the magicians and the enchanters and the wise men. He brought them around and he said, I want you guys to do two things. And get this is important to this story. I want you to do two things. First, I want you to tell me what my dream was. And then I want you to tell me the interpretation of my dream. I want you to tell me what my dream was, and I want you to tell me the interpretation of the dream. And these guys are like, I don't know. Why don't you just tell us the dream first, and then we'll interpret it for you? Well, obviously they wanted him to tell them the dream because then they could just make up some sort of interpretation and get away with it, right? But Nebuchadnezzar, being a smart guy, as corrupt as he may have been, very, very smart, realized that that's what they were doing. They were playing a game. And that's why he said, you got to tell me what my dream was first. And then you've got to interpret it. So, if you look at chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, if you do not tell me the dream, there is just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me. So the qualifier for him being willing to trust their interpretation was that they could tell him the dream in the first place. Okay? So this is what's going on. Tell me the dream, and then you can interpret it for me, but if not, you're in big trouble. So they give up. Verse 11. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods. And don't think that's a typo. That's not. That's exactly how they would have thought of this. They wouldn't have thought of the one true God. They would have thought in terms of multiple gods. And watch this. And they do not live among men. Okay? So what they're saying is, Nebuchadnezzar, you're asking something that none of us can handle. And only the gods can do stuff like this. But, I'm sorry. We walked around and looked around and asked amongst ourselves. And there's not any gods around. And so nobody can help you out. Well, verses 12 and 13. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death. See, very different type of leader, right? So, see, he didn't go like, golly gee shucks. He's like, you guys can't do this? But then you're going to have to die. You're no good to me. And men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. So even though Daniel had no hand in this, no part in this, when the decree went out, when the order went out to kill all the wise men, that included Daniel and his friends as well. That's the situation, okay? That's the situation. The situation is this. The king is ticked, and he wants heads to roll. He wants people to die because he's not getting what he wanted. Just wonder who's going to save the day. Let's talk solutions. Daniel finds out about this. And verse 16 tells us, at the recognition of the situation, Daniel went to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Okay, you guys remember the story of David and Goliath? Right, most of us want to jump to the battle scene and the slingshot and all that. But there's a lot of important parts of that story before you ever get there. And one of the important pieces is all the army, right? Saul's army, they were afraid to fight Goliath. And the king's like, hey, I'll let you marry my daughters. You don't have to pay taxes. I'll give you all sorts of good stuff if you go fight this guy. But they were afraid. David is the only guy who wasn't fearful. Well, if you have a very similar situation here where all the wise guys are afraid to interpret the dream, but Daniel says, let me at it. Let me at it. Give me some time with the king. I will interpret his dream. Let me give you a little in between here. Keep in mind that to this point we have no knowledge whatsoever that Daniel had been interpreting dreams, that he had a lot of experience with this, and yet he is willing to go down that road. And so here's what he does. He tells his friends, you need to pray about this, okay? And he gives praise to God who gives him the interpretation of the dream. So this is this first thing that I need to pause and make sure that you guys get. Okay? All of us are going to, from time to time, be in a situation that we've never been in before. Right? If you are at all trying to improve who you are as a human, to improve who you are as a Christian, to improve who you are as a son, or as a father, as a mother, as an employee in your job, you will find yourselves in uncomfortable new situations. And that's what Daniel found himself in. And so he tells his friends, go pray. Pray that God will give me the interpretation. And God indeed does do that. God delivers Daniel in the sense that he gives him the interpretation, and then Daniel praises God. So here's your success tip from a spiritual standpoint. Number one is pray about those nervous situations. Don't be afraid of them, but pray about them. And two, give God the praise, even before the physical deliverance. Give him the praise before he even does what you've asked for. Too often, again, our prayer life is like a demand list for God. Here it is. Give me this, give me this, give me this, and I'm going to sit here with my grumpy face until I get it. Can you imagine how much more powerful it would be is if your prayer life included what Philippians 4, 6, and 7 tells us, a spirit of thankfulness. That not only do I pray to you, but I praise you long before I ever see the proof of my prayer. With that, he comes in front of Nebuchadnezzar, and as verse 27 and 28 says, Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is, watch this, a God. You see the difference? See, the beginning of Daniel's conversation with Nebuchadnezzar is very much like the other wise men. Nobody can do this, right? Right? Isn't that the very same message? Nobody can do this. The difference is, they say, except for the gods, and Daniel says, a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Now watch this. Daniel knows he's about to tell him this dream. But does Daniel give himself the credit for it? Does Daniel walk up to Nebuchadnezzar and say, check this out. This is what I do. I'm a dream interpreter. Right? And so let me drop some knowledge on you, Nebuchadnezzar. He doesn't do that. He's giving all the credit to God. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. He says, you saw a great statue with a head of gold, with a chest and arms of silver, with the middle and the thighs, which is represented here with bronze, legs of iron, and then feet that are partly iron and partly clay. And then he says, you also saw a rock that was made not with hands, if you will, by the hands of God. And that rock crushed the statue. And then he says, let me interpret it for you. He says, you, Nebuchadnezzar, are that head of gold, King of kings. But after you will come a kingdom that is less than you, and then after that another kingdom, and then eventually you'll get to a fourth kingdom. That fourth kingdom will be very, very, very powerful. It will be that king of iron. But then during that fourth kingdom, that rock, that in your dream smashed the statue and then became a mountain that covered the world. During that fourth kingdom, the God of heaven will create his own kingdom that will never be destroyed. He says, that's your dream, and that's the interpretation. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. Do you see this? See, what brought Nebuchadnezzar to his knees, to his face, literally, was not really just the brilliance of Daniel, but the fact that Daniel brought this to him in this format, in this framing, humble and giving the credit to God, and then quickly and accurately describing exactly what no other man could do. You've got to remember back to the words of the enchanters and the wise men. They said, only the gods can do this, but what? But they don't live amongst the men. But what did Daniel prove? That God lives amongst the men, because Daniel was able to deliver the message that only a God can do. What does it tell Nebuchadnezzar? That God is working through this man. So he falls prostrate in front of him. Then the king said to Daniel, watch this, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries. See, he knows where the credit needs to go because Daniel showed him where the credit is supposed to go. That is why I tell you, it is more, Christians need to be more than just nice and kind and good. Because you can be nice, kind, and good because you're a Boy Scout. You can be nice, kind, and good because you're a Girl Scout. You can be nice, kind, and good because you went to a class that told you if you're nice, kind, and good, then people will be nice, kind, and good to you. Or you can be nice, kind, and good and giving and loving because God has changed your heart. But people don't know where to give the credit if you don't tell them where to give the credit. And if you're willing to accept the credit, people will give you the credit. But as Matthew chapter 5 tells us, then you've received your reward. But Daniel told him where the credit should go. And that's why you see that statement. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Did this work out for him? This worked out for him, but let me tell you why it worked out for him. It worked out for him because he was not trying to make it work out for him, but to work out for God. See, we got to stop trying to say, wow, I'm trying to get promoted. How do I do this? We got to stop that. We got to say, how do I just do what's right? How do I live a life before men that when they see my light, my Father in heaven is glorified? How do I do that? That was Daniel's focus, and that is why Daniel was promoted. Not promoted because he was trying to get promoted, but promoted because he was trying to glorify God. And indeed he did. So here's your summary. I'm going to give you a summary and a conclusion, and then we're done. Stay with me. Daniel was faced with a never experienced this before situation. You know what I'm talking about? Right? That situation where I don't know what to do. I've never been in this situation before. I've never been in this situation before. Daniel was faced with a never experienced this before situation. Right? He faithfully stood up to the challenge though. Right? I'm not in this business. But hey, I can do this. Why? Because God is going to work with me just as He's worked with me before. He prayed and praised. Don't forget that. He prayed and praised. Praise God long before you ever see what you ask for. Just imagine how much more likely you are to connect with the God of the universe if when you ask Him for something, you do it with a smile on your face, knowing that He'll deliver. God delivered, and then when God delivered, Nebuchadnezzar was humbled. And then Daniel and his friends were promoted. Is that not the story from Daniel chapter 2? And then here's our conclusion. What do I want you to take from this? Just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't. Just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't. Trust God to work with you and for you in all areas of the unknown. And here's why. Because what is unknown to you is not unknown to God. I know you guys don't like to say amen, but I'm telling you that is an amen. What is not, just because you don't know it doesn't mean that God doesn't know it. So what you have to do is you just have to tap into Him. I don't know how to handle this, God, but I know you do. So I'm going to pray and I'm going to praise and I'm going to let you deliver. Do you see this? This is what I'm talking about. This is why faith fixes fear. You're able to handle, I've never been in this situation before situations. You're able to handle, I've never experienced this before situations, because you're going to place it in the hands of a God who has nothing that falls into the category of unknown. So just because you don't know doesn't mean God doesn't know. Just because you have it doesn't mean that you can't. And finally, fix your fears by making decisions of faith. Don't let the unknown cause you to be afraid. Let the unknown excite you. Let the unknown excite you, because your God is bigger than the unknown. And what is, again, unknown to you is intimately known by the God of the universe. You just got to connect to Him. Well, how do you connect to Him? You connect to Him by praying and with praise, and then you let Him work it out. Let your faith fix the fear.